Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Teach Them to Love to Write mini series for the month of April. This is all part of our Creative Writing Roundup event that's happening all month long. And you can check out the details on our website. We've got a form that pops up there so you won't miss it. And so today we are talking about teaching research and writing using biographies to inspire autobiographies. So each week we wanted to feature one of our Canadian Schoolhouse team members, and this week we've got Kristen. So enjoy this tip from Kristen.
Hi, I am Kristen. I'm one of the staff members with the Canadian Schoolhouse, and I am here to do our writing tips video for this week. If you have not yet signed up for our Creative Writing Roundup, you're going to want to do that, but we're going to talk about that as this video goes on. So this month of April, we want to encourage and motivate your kids to write. And to do that, we have a series of 4 videos in April with different tips, different writing prompts that we're hoping is going to help your child learn to love to write. So our April 20th writing prompts, we have a few different ones. You can access these. We have with the old Schoolhouse Teachers has different writing prompts for every single day this day in history. So some of the ones for April 20th are: on this day in 1859, the first volume of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities was published. So the prompt says, if you have not yet read this book, now would be a good time. Research the historical happenings of this time in the history of France. Write a paper on why it was considered the best of times and the worst of times. Another this day in history, in 1902, scientists Marie and Pierre Curie isolated the radioactive element radium. So you can use a writing prompt to find out more about the Curies. And on this day in history in 1853, Harriet Tubman began her work on the Underground Railroad. Find out more about the Underground Railroad, find a specific route that Harriet Tubman was known to use, and write a narrative from the point of view of a slave girl escaping with her as guide. How did she find the slaves that wanted to escape? Where did she take them? What close calls did they have along the way? How did they hide? So those are that's an example of the writing prompts that you can get for every day. Our theme for our Creative Writing Roundup this year is centered around historical fiction, going back in time. And so in this video today, I want to talk about how we can use journaling to record stories. So one of the prompts was about Harriet Tubman. And if you look into Harriet Tubman, a lot of the details about her life and the actions that she took, the things that happened surrounding her life, the reason why we have that information today is because they were recorded in old diaries and in old newspapers, old letters. So people at the time, and Harriet Tubman herself, documented what was happening, and that's how we now, many years past, are able to know what was happening. So that means even for us today, being able to journal and keep diaries and write letters about what's happening now might be important down the road. So I'm kind of looking to the side because I've got my two assistants here with me. So I'm talking to the video, but I'm also looking to the side because I'm talking to my kiddos. I figured if I'm going to talk about teaching writing, what better assistants to have than the 2 kids that I actually do teach to write on a daily basis. So I was drawn to the one about Harriet Tubman. I am a lover of historical fiction, and this is Haley. And Haley and I just finished reading Number the Stars together, which, even though it's not about Harriet Tubman or about this exact prompt, it is a historical fiction book, and it is about a family and a young girl who helped people escape. It wasn't slaves, it was Jews. But that prompt really made me think about this book. And so that drew me in, and it made me really think about the journaling aspect. And for our Creative Writing Roundup, you can submit any type of writing around our theme, around our historical fiction theme. So you can submit a journal entry, you can submit you could write a newspaper article, you can write a poem, a short story, you can write a letter, any of these things, any type of writing that you want to do, and you can submit it. And at the end, it'll be compiled into an ebook. Last year we did one about animals, and these two put in some stories. Do you remember what yours was about?
Mine is about my guinea pig.
Yeah, you wrote about Mr. Whisker's day out or something,
Yeah,
right? He went on an adventure.
A true story that actually happened when Mr. Whiskers was outside and he went into the woods and I got him. And then what could have happened if I didn't get him, which is be the fake story.
Right, so you wrote about that, and you wrote about...
I wrote about a lamb and her friends and like what they did.
Yeah, and so they wrote their stories, submitted it, and then it gets bound, or not bound, sorry, it gets put into an ebook. And that was pretty cool to get to see their little stories published in an ebook. So, we're going to talk today about these three methods: journaling, letter writing, and newspaper writing. Those are all shorter forms of writing. So if you have a resistant writer, someone who's reluctant to write, doesn't really love writing, journaling or letter writing might be something that's more appealing to them because it is a lot shorter. As well, it's less formal. So it can be short, it can be focused on those main details, and it can be a lot less formal. So these are good ways to get kids writing. I know one way that we've encouraged writing between Haley and I, we have a little journal, don't we, Hales?
Yes, we like take turns writing to each other.
Yeah, it's a way that we can express our thoughts that sometimes we aren't ready to say, but we can write to each other. So we have a little journal that we write back and forth in, and we've done that since she was pretty young, probably since she was just starting to write. That's something that we've done back and forth. It's something that gets her writing, but it's also a good tool of communication for us. That's one great way. And I just wanted to share some ideas if you have kids that are a little bit hesitant to write or they're new writers, some ways that you can get them writing and help them with that. Do you remember what we used to do
On the plane?
on the plane?
Yeah, we'd write back and forth like in the story. We'd like each write a sentence or a few words, and then the other person would take a turn, like writing a story.
Yeah. So when we used to fly, Haley and I used to write shared stories. So she would write however much she felt like she could write, a couple words or whatever she thought, and then she would pass it over to me, and then like I would write a little bit, pass it back to her. She would write a little bit, and we would write a story that way. So that it was like a funny thing that we were doing together. It was working on her creative storytelling, but it wasn't taxing her ability to write. One thing, and this is applicable to reading and to writing, when you're just learning, it takes so much brain power. When you're trying to write, it takes so much brain power to think about the writing skill, to spell the words, that it can take the enjoyment out of it. So it's really important when you're doing a creative writing to not focus so much on the spelling and the grammar and the sentence structure. There's a time and a place for that when you're practicing spelling and grammar, but when you're doing creative writing, you want to take that stress out of it. And so if that looks like going back and forth, writing some each, that's fine. It might also look like narration. So I have Sophie's old journal here. Sophie's in grade 3 now, but at the beginning, you used to just tell us, oh, I won't show it for long. Sophie would just draw her picture and tell us what to write, and we would write it for her. And then what did we do next, Soph? What was the next step?
So, Mommy or Daddy, I would tell them what to write for my picture, and then they would write it, and then I would use a Sharpie to copy over it.
Yeah, we would, so she would narrate to us, and we would write it in highlighter, and then she could use a pencil or whatever to copy over it. So that was the next step. So we did narration, and then we put it in highlighter so she could trace over it. That helped her. And then, do you remember what we did next? What?
So I would tell them what to write. They would write it. And then down below, I would write what I wanted. Like the same thing, I would copy them.
Right. Because then you didn't have to worry about how to spell things. You got to get your ideas out. So all those different ways are ways that you're getting your ideas out, but you're not having the stress of spelling. And now we've kind of moved into working on sounding out words. But when you're doing something creative writing, so when you're having your child do this assignment or this activity, you don't want to worry about their sentence structure and their grammar and their spelling. We have editors on our team that are going to edit it before it goes into the ebook. So you don't have to worry about that. Isn't that good news? Yeah. So that you just let their creative juices flowing. When you're looking for a creative writing, you don't want to put those restrictions on it because you want to give them a chance to express their creativity. We also want to make sure that when we're writing historical fiction, so when we read a book like Number of the Stars, or when we read a book like Underground to Canada, or any of these historical fiction books, we've read some diary historical fiction books from the Dear Canada series. When we're reading those, you have one? I thought you took it back. When we're reading, so in Number of the Stars, the characters in this book aren't real characters, but what has happened in that time is true. So we want to make sure that we're telling the true facts, even if the characters that we're using are fictional. But we're not going to say that like, oh, these people flew in on magic carpets to rescue the slaves or something like that. They're not going to fly in on magic carpets. We're not going to make up a historical event, but we can use fictional characters to tell it. So this type of writing, when we're writing about things in history, it does require some research because you want to know what happened at the time period that you're going to write about. You want to show?
Yeah. From the library, I got this Dear Canada book. It's the Titanic diary, and like it has like the girl writes it. It's a fictional girl, but like it has the dates, like May 14.
So can you imagine, Haley, how we would take another story? We would make up our own, but for now, for the time being, if we were gonna take a character from this book and we wanted to turn it into something that looked like a journal. So like, who was your favorite character in this one? Anne-Marie, the main character. So if you were going to write a journal article for her, what's like the main event that stands out for you about her life?
Them saving the Jews and her going to her uncle's house.
So which day would you want to write a journal article about?
The day she took the cloth into the woods to take to her uncle.
Right, so then you would put, if you knew the date, you would put it, or you could just put a date, and then you would write like Dear Diary, and then you don't have to write a whole bunch of paragraphs, right? You're just telling the main idea. So how would you usually start a diary, like a journal entry?
In my diary, I usually write Dear Diary and stuff like that.
And then what would you say about, you would say like today, what would you say about that event? Like today I had
went into the woods and met soldiers.
Yeah, today I had to take a package to my uncle and I had to run through the woods as fast as I could to get it there fast. And I ran into soldiers and I felt so scared, but thankfully they let me go. You know, so you're just hitting the main details. So you can really do that in like a couple sentences, right? It wouldn't take a whole page. And so this is a really good type of writing for a reluctant writer or a new writer because they can get those main ideas down without feeling really overwhelmed or bogged down with a long writing assignment. I hope that is helpful. So you want to make sure that you're researching whatever it is you're going to write about so that we're using true historical facts, but then we can use our fictional characters, but we still want to make sure we're telling about that time period accurately. And I hope that you will remember the few tips that I gave you for resistant readers or new readers. You can do narration. You can do a shared writing assignment.
Yeah.
You can have a journal back and forth. You can write what they tell you in highlighter and have them trace it, or write what they tell you and have them copy it. Those are just some ways to help your weaker writers or your more frustrated writers. If you have not yet signed up for our creative writing roundup, the tips and ideas email that we are sending throughout the month of April, now is a really good time to do that. You'll be able to link that, sign up through the link in the comments. You don't want to miss out on that. You'll get lots of great tips, and you can have your children submit a really fun piece to get published in our ebook. Have a great day.
Just making sure we put our mics back on. So I loved all of those tips, and I just wanted to encourage anyone who's listening, especially when you think about research and writing. It sounds so formal, and facts and data. It's boring stuff. But I mean, if you present it in a way like you do with your girls, like I was actually messaging Kristen while she was presenting there, and I'm like, "You're such a good mama. Like, I wish I I wish I was in your school." Because it sounds so fun, right? And that's what we get to do as moms, right? We don't have to teach it like some boring, stuffy old professor, right? It could be a fun experience, and you're covering so many different topics. Like, history is so broad. So even if you don't like a particular time period, there's so many other time periods that you could cover, and you find the ones that kind of stick out to them and run with it. Because my guys, I'm not into world wars. I just don't like wars in general. But my oldest one is obsessed with the wars, and like he remembers the dates. Like he just
Oh, wow.
he asks to read about, but we just bought him a series on Hitler, and he was asking to read about Chernobyl, and I'm like, who knew? But obviously, because we have the freedom to read whatever we like, and that's what we do. We just choose, and we go with that. I am going to give you your freebie link. If there's anything, Kristen, that you wanted to add before we wrap up, but I'm just dropping this link in
Well, I
the
think
comments.
everybody heard my voice for a long time already. I mean, I like love historical fiction. That's my favorite genre to read. So it's like an easy thing to pass on to my kids. And I just wrote an article that went on this month about like our favorite historical fiction books for kids. So that's that's like an easy way to like wet their whistle about, find what they like, and it's presented in an interesting way. And I was nervous about Haley reading that book. It was part of her language arts curriculum for this year. And instead of I just wasn't sure, because she's so sensitive. I wasn't sure how it would go. So we read it together just in case, but it was presented very gently. And actually, I would like realize that Sophie was supposed to be in bed, but she'd be like hiding in the hallway because she wanted to hear what was going to happen.
And that's my oldest too. He was just like, it's 11 o'clock, guy. What are you doing? And he's in the dark with his little light reading lamp, and he's reading these books, these history books. And I'm like, you can't get mad. You can't get mad at them because they're doing something good, right? They
Right.
could be like video games under the covers.
I think like one of my biggest tips that I would give to people regarding like writing and homeschooling, because that was, from a lot of years, I felt like that's where we were lacking the most in our homeschool. But then I started to look at all the stuff that they were doing outside of our sit down school time, because no one wants to write when someone's telling you like, you have to write, I need you to write a couple sentences about a bat, or, whatever. But then if I would look at what they were doing in their free time, they would be playing Stuffy Hospital, and they'd have a clipboard where they were like doing the intake sheets for their stuffies, or they're like solving mysteries, and they have little journals where they're writing their clues and interviewing suspects. I'm like, okay, they are writing. And so if you're letting what they're reading, like if they're taking that in and then they're putting that out into their writing, it's not as, gives them a little bit more buy-in to what they're doing. And that's what's good about the types of writing we talked about this week, like the letters and journals, that kind of thing. They're not as formal. So it doesn't feel like as much of a chore.
Yeah, and I think that's key too, because when it becomes too formal and too rigid, then it's just something they hate, right?
Right.
And so nobody wants that. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
do anything that they hate. And then you
No.
certainly don't want to teach that subject too. So,
No, that just makes it no
um,
fun for anybody.
exactly. Okay, so I just I put that link there for our theme page, learning through historical fiction. So you'll find all of those articles in there that will inspire you to write on historical fiction, including the one that Kristen just mentioned. And I see Steph has joined us in the chat here. She's popped in some writing prompts, homeschooling with the TCS posts. So check that out. Check out that link. Thanks, Steph. And
Don't forget
we
to
will
sign
let
up for the creative writing roundup.
yeah. So you can find the link right on the homepage. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your entries. So we'll let you go for now, and we will see you next week. So bye for now.